Nobody expected it to go this far, because what started as subtle tension behind the scenes just turned into a full-blown family showdown. And this time, it's not just rumors. It's personal, it's messy, and it's pulling in names that make this situation even bigger than anyone imagined. Because according to multiple sources, T.I. didn't just sit back and watch anymore. He stepped in. And not quietly, not calmly, but in a way that left people around him completely stunned. Because the moment he found out what King Harris and Domani allegedly did involving 50 Cent, everything changed. And here's the part that's making this situation even more explosive. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It wasn't just kids being kids. According to insiders, they crossed a line. A line that, in T.Y.'s world, you do not cross. And when that line got crossed, it triggered something nobody was ready for. Because witnesses are now saying that T.I. didn't just call them out. He confronted them directly, face to face, and what was said in that moment is being described as intense, emotional, and borderline explosive. But here's where it gets even crazier. Because 50 Cent's name being involved, that changes everything. Because if there's one thing people know about 50, it's that he doesn't let things slide. He doesn't forget. And he definitely doesn't stay quiet when he feels disrespected. So now the question isn't just, what did King Harris and Domani actually do? It's, did they just pull their father into something he never wanted to be part of? Because sources are hinting that whatever happened, it didn't just affect their relationship with T.I. It may have opened the door to something much bigger. Something that could turn this into more than just a family issue. Into a full-blown public conflict. And if that wasn't enough, there are whispers, again, unconfirmed but spreading fast, that this situation may have already reached 50 Cent himself. Meaning, this might not stay behind closed doors for long. And trust me, if 50 decides to respond, this whole situation could explode in a way nobody can control. But what really happened behind the scenes? What pushed T.I. to finally step in? And why people are saying this moment might change everything between them? That's where the story takes a turn you're not ready for. Because once we break down what led up to that confrontation, you'll realize this didn't happen overnight. Now, before we get into that explosive confrontation, you need to understand something very important. Because this situation, it didn't just come out of nowhere. This has been building quietly, under the surface, for a long time. And at the center of it all, T.I.A., father. A veteran in the game. Someone who has seen everything. The highs, the lows, the loyalty, and the betrayal. But more importantly, someone who has always tried to keep his family in line. Because if you've been watching closely over the years, and you already know this, T.I. has always been very vocal about discipline, about respect, about knowing where the line is, and never crossing it, especially when it comes to public image. Because in his world, one wrong move doesn't just affect you. It affects the entire name, the entire legacy. And that's exactly why this situation hit so differently. Because this time, it wasn't outsiders causing the problem, it was his own sons, King Harris and Domani. Now let's talk about them for a second. Because these aren't random names. These are T.I.'s sons. Both growing up in the spotlight, both trying to carve out their own identities, but in very different ways. King Harris? He's been known for being loud, bold, unfiltered, the kind of energy that grabs attention. Sometimes for the right reasons, and sometimes for the wrong ones. He's had moments before. Moments where people questioned his attitude, his approach, his willingness to speak on things publicly that others would keep quiet. And every time, it created tension. Not always visible, but definitely there. Then you have Domani. Different energy, more reserved, more calculated, less about the noise, more about the message. But even with that, he's still part of the same environment, the same pressure, the same expectations that come with carrying a name like T.I.'s. And that's where things start to get complicated. Because when you have two completely different personalities moving in the same spotlight, mistakes don't just happen. They multiply. And according to people close to the situation, that's exactly what happened here. Because over the past few weeks, there were signs. Small ones at first, comments, posts, subtle shots that most people didn't even catch. But insiders, they noticed. And more importantly, so did T.I. Now at first, it didn't seem serious, just typical back and forth. Young energy, nothing that would spiral out of control, but then 50 Cent's name entered the picture. And the moment that happened, everything shifted. Because if you know anything about 50, you know this. He doesn't play about respect. He doesn't tolerate disrespect. And once his name gets involved in something, it doesn't stay small. It gets loud, fast. And according to multiple sources, that's exactly what T.I. was trying to avoid. Because the last thing he wanted was his sons getting caught up in something involving 50 Cent. Not because he couldn't handle it, but because he knew what it could turn into. A public situation. A messy one. One that could spiral beyond control. And that's why, at first, he tried to keep things contained, handled privately. No public reactions, no statements. Just behind-the-scenes conversations. But here's where things started going wrong. Because instead of slowing down, the situation kept building. More comments, more attention, more people starting to notice. And once the internet starts paying attention, there's no going back. Because now it's not just a private issue anymore, it's public, it's viral, and it's out of your control. And that's exactly what happened. Because the moment clips and posts started circulating, people began connecting the dots. King Harris, Domani, 50 Cent, and suddenly, this wasn't just family tension anymore, this was something bigger. Something that had the potential to turn into a full-blown public conflict. And that's when T.I. realized this couldn't stay quiet anymore, this couldn't be handled behind closed doors. Because at this point, the damage was already starting. And if he didn't step in now, it could get worse. Much worse. And that brings us to the moment everything finally exploded. Because what happened next wasn't a conversation. It wasn't advice. It was a confrontation. And trust me, when we get into what was actually said in that moment, you're going to understand why people are calling this a turning point. And what makes this situation even more intense is that this isn't the first time tension like this has surfaced, not publicly, but behind the scenes. Because according to people close to the family, there have been moments before where T.I. had to step in. Moments where things were getting a little too loud, a little too reckless, a little too close to crossing that invisible line he's always talked about. But those moments, they were contained, handled privately. No cameras, no viral clips, no outside pressure. Just family. Just conversations. Just correction. But this time, this was different. Because this time, the spotlight was already on them. And once that spotlight hits, every move gets amplified, every word gets dissected, every mistake becomes a headline. And that's exactly what started happening here. Because as the situation involving 50 Cent began gaining attention, people didn't just watch. They picked sides. Some defending King Harris, saying he's just being himself, speaking his truth, not afraid to stand on what he believes. Others calling him out, saying he's moving reckless, disrespectful, not understanding the weight of the name he carries. And then there was Domani, caught in the middle because while he wasn't as loud, he was still part of the conversation, still connected to the situation, still being pulled into something that was growing bigger by the second. And that's what made it even more complicated. Because now it wasn't just one son, it was both. Both names being mentioned, both being tied to something involving 50 Cent. And that's exactly why T.I. couldn't ignore it anymore. Because this wasn't just about behavior. This was about reputation, about legacy, about how the family name is seen, not just by fans, but by people in the industry. And trust me, in that world, perception is everything. Because once a narrative starts forming, it's hard to stop it. And right now, a narrative was forming fast. One that suggested T.I.'s sons were stepping out of line, that they were getting involved in situations they didn't fully understand, and that this could lead to something much bigger if it wasn't checked. And that's exactly what pushed things to the edge. Because according to insiders, there was a specific moment. A moment where something was said or posted that crossed that final line. Now, nobody is confirming exactly what it was, but everyone is saying the same thing. That was the moment T.I. snapped. Not emotionally, but decisively. Because from that point on, there was no more waiting. No more hoping things would calm down on their own. It was time to step in. And not just as a father, but as someone who understands exactly how fast situations like this can spiral. Because here's the reality. When 50 Cent's name gets involved, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads. It escalates. And if it turns into something public, it can go way further than anyone intended. And that's exactly what Tia was trying to prevent. But by the time he made that decision, it might have already been too late. Because the internet was already watching, already reacting, already building the story in real time. And once that happens, even private conversations can turn into public moments. And that's exactly what happened next. Because the confrontation everyone is talking about, it didn't stay behind closed doors. Details started leaking. Pieces of the conversation, fragments of what was said. And the more those details came out, the more intense it sounded. Because this wasn't calm, this wasn't casual, this was serious, emotional. And according to one source, it felt like a line was being drawn right there in that moment. Now think about that. A line being drawn. That means something changed, something shifted, something that might not go back to how it was before. And that's exactly why people are paying so much attention right now. Because this isn't just about what happened. It's about what it means moving forward. Because when things reach this level, there are only two outcomes. It gets resolved, or it gets worse. And based on what's coming out so far, this situation is leaning toward the second option. Because what was said during that confrontation, what T.I. allegedly told King Harris and Domani, didn't just address the moment, it revealed something much deeper. And trust me, when we get into that next part, you're going to understand why people are saying this might change everything between them, and what was said during that confrontation. This is where everything gets real, because according to multiple sources who claim they were close to the situation, this wasn't a calm sit-down. This wasn't advice. This was pressure, raw, direct, and intense. Because the moment T.I. got King Harris and Domani in front of him, he didn't waste time, no small talk, no easing into it. He went straight to the point, and the first thing he allegedly said, it set the tone for everything that followed. Y'all don't understand what you just stepped into. Now think about that. That's not just a warning. That's someone who knows how deep the situation could go. Because to T.I., this wasn't just about a comment, or a post, or even 50 Cent's name being mentioned. This was about consequences. Real ones. The kind that don't just disappear. And according to insiders, King Harris didn't back down immediately. And in fact, that's where things started getting even more heated. Because instead of apologizing, instead of stepping back, he allegedly stood his ground, trying to explain his side, trying to justify what was said or done, and that's what pushed the tension even higher. Because now it wasn't just T.I. speaking, it was a back and forth. Voices rising, energy shifting. The kind of moment where you can feel things about to snap. And Domani, he wasn't loud, but he wasn't silent either. Because while King was pushing back, Domani was trying to explain. trying to bring logic into the situation, trying to calm it down, but at the same time, not fully stepping away from what had already happened. And that's what made it even more complicated, because now T.I. wasn't just dealing with one perspective, he was dealing with two different approaches, two different reactions, both tied to the same situation. And according to one source, that's when T.I. said something that changed everything. This ain't just about you. This affects all of us. Now that line, that's bigger than the moment, because that's about legacy, about the name, about everything he's built over the years, and the fear that one wrong move could damage it. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get more intense, the first major twist happened. Because according to another insider, T.I. revealed something during that confrontation that King Harris and Domani allegedly didn't know. Something about 50 Cent, something behind the scenes. And when he said it, everything shifted. Everything. Now, nobody is confirming exactly what that detail was. But everyone describing the moment is saying the same thing. That's when the room went quiet. Now think about that. Because for a moment like this, for a confrontation this heated, to suddenly go quiet, that means something serious was said. Something that changed how they saw the situation. And here's where it gets even more intense. Because after that moment, the tone changed completely. Because what started as pushback turned into realization. Because whatever T.I. revealed, it made it clear that this situation wasn't just surface level. It went deeper, much deeper. And that's exactly why people are now asking, what does T.I. know about 50 Cent that his sons didn't? And why did it take this moment for that information to come out? Okay, because if there really is something behind the scenes, something that connects to this situation, then this isn't just a family issue anymore. This is something bigger. Something that could involve history, relationships, and possibly even things that were never meant to be brought up again. But just when it seemed like the confrontation was starting to calm down, it didn't, because what happened next took the situation from intense to completely explosive. And just when it felt like that moment of silence might calm everything down, it didn't, because instead of ending the confrontation, that reveal from T.I. actually pushed things even further. Because according to insiders, King Harris wasn't ready to fully back down. Not yet. Even after hearing what T.I. said, even after realizing this situation might be deeper than he thought, he still had something to say. And that's when the energy shifted again. Because now it wasn't just about explaining actions. It became about respect. Because King allegedly responded with something along the lines of, "I'm not wrong for standing on what I said." Now pause. Because that line, that's not defiance for no reason. That's someone who believes they're justified. Someone who doesn't feel like they crossed a line, even if everyone else is telling them they did. And that's what made this moment so intense. Because now you have two completely different perspectives colliding. T.I. seeing the bigger picture, consequences, reputation, long-term impact. King Harris focused on the moment, expression, stance, being heard, and Domani still in the middle. Still trying to navigate both sides, but at this point, even he couldn't keep things balanced because the tension was too high. The stakes were too real, and that's when things took a turn nobody expected. Because according to one source, I didn't just keep talking. He made a decision, right there, in that moment, a line in the sand. And what he said next, it changed everything. If this goes any further, don't expect me to fix it. Now that line, that's heavy. Because that's not just a warning, that's stepping back. That's saying, you made this move. You deal with the consequences, and for someone like T.I., who has always stepped in, always protected, always managed situations, that's a big shift. Because it suggests something deeper. He's tired. Not just of this moment, but of the pattern. And that's what made this hit even harder. Because now this isn't just about one incident. It's about everything leading up to it. And that's exactly why the room reportedly went quiet again. Because this time, it wasn't shock. It was realization. Because King Harris and Domani weren't just hearing frustration, they were hearing a boundary. And boundaries like that, they don't get set lightly, but just when it felt like that might be the end of it, it wasn't. Because here comes the second twist, and this one, nobody saw coming. Because shortly after that confrontation, a post surfaced. And not from T.I., not from Domani, but from King Harris. Now, at first, it didn't seem directly connected. No names, no direct references. But the timing, too perfect. The wording, too specific. Because the post allegedly said, "Sometimes the truth makes people uncomfortable. But I'm not changing for anyone." Now think about that. Because if that was posted right after that confrontation, that's not random. That's a response. And the internet picked up on it immediately. Because now it looks like T.I. draws a line, King Harris responds publicly. And just like that, what was a private situation started becoming public again. And that's exactly what T.I. was trying to avoid. But here's where it gets even more intense. Because once that post started gaining attention, people began tagging 50 Cent over and over and over again. Now that's where things get dangerous. Because once 50's name starts trending in a situation like this, it doesn't stay quiet. And if he decides to respond, how this entire situation could explode beyond control. And that's exactly why tension is rising right now. Because at this point, it's not just about what already happened. It's about what's about to happen. Because if 50 Cent enters this situation, it won't stay a family issue anymore. It becomes something much bigger, much louder, much harder to control. And trust me, based on what's starting to happen next, we might be closer to that moment than anyone realizes. And the moment people started tagging 50 Cent, everything escalated fast. Because if there's one thing you don't do lightly, it's drag 50 into something that's already heated. And just like that, his name started trending again and again. Every comment section, every repost, every clip. People weren't just watching anymore, they were calling him into it. Almost like they wanted a response. And that's when things took a turn nobody was ready for. Because out of nowhere, 50 Cent posted. Now it wasn't a long rant. It wasn't a full breakdown. It was something way more calculated. A short post, but the kind that hits hard. Because according to screenshots circulating online, he allegedly posted, "Y'all better learn when to stay out grown man business." Now pause, because that line, that's not random, that's direct. And even though he didn't name anyone, everybody knew exactly who it was aimed at. King Harris, Domani, and indirectly, the entire situation. And just like that, the internet lost it. Because now this wasn't speculation anymore. This wasn't people guessing what might happen. 50 Cent had entered the conversation. And when he enters, things don't stay calm. But here's where it gets even more intense. Because instead of backing down, instead of staying quiet after that, King Harris allegedly reacted again. Now this part, unconfirmed, but spreading fast. Because clips and posts started circulating claiming that King didn't take that message lightly. That he felt targeted, called out, and that he wasn't just going to sit back and ignore it. And if that's true, then we're looking at something much bigger than a family confrontation now. Because now, it's crossing into public territory. Directly. But just when people thought it couldn't get more serious, I stepped back in. And this time, it wasn't private. Because according to sources, he reached out, not just to his sons, but to 50 Cent. Now that changes everything. Because this isn't just a father trying to control a situation anymore. This is someone trying to prevent a full-blown public conflict. And according to one insider, that conversation was tense. Not disrespectful, not aggressive, but serious. Because both sides understood one thing. This could get out of control. Fast. And that's exactly what they were trying to avoid. But here's the shocking reveal that nobody expected. Because during that alleged conversation, something was said. Something that hasn't been fully confirmed, but is being repeated across multiple sources. That T, I made it clear. This isn't how I move, and it's not how my house moves either. Now that line, that's powerful, because that's him drawing a boundary publicly and privately, separating himself from the situation, making it clear that whatever happened doesn't represent him. But here's the problem. By the time that message was delivered, the situation was already out, already viral, already moving faster than anyone could control. And that's why this next part is so important, because even though T.I. tried to step in, tried to calm things down, tried to keep it from exploding further, it might have already been too late. Because once 50 Cent responds, and once the internet gets involved, things don't just disappear, they escalate. And that's exactly what started happening next. Because a new clip, a new piece of content, just surfaced. And this one, it doesn't just add to the story, it takes it to a whole new level. And that new clip everyone is talking about? This is where things go from heated to completely out of control, because the moment it surfaced, people didn't just react, they panicked. Now the clip itself, short, grainy, clearly recorded on a phone. But the content? That's what made it explode. Because in the clip, you can allegedly see King Harris standing with a group, talking, animated, clearly addressing something that had just happened. And at one point, he says a line that instantly sent the internet into chaos. "I'm not backing down from nobody. I don't care who it is." Now stop. Because if that line is real, and if it's connected to what's happening right now, that's not just confidence, that's escalation. Because at this point, everyone already knows who's involved. Everyone already knows 50 Cent has responded. And everyone already knows T.I. is trying to calm things down. So a statement like that, it doesn't de-escalate anything, it pushes it further. And that's exactly why people started reacting the way they did. Because now it feels like T.I. is trying to contain it. 50 Cent has already acknowledged it. And King Harris isn't stepping back. And that combination, that's dangerous. Because situations like this, they don't resolve quietly. They build. They grow. They turn into something much bigger than anyone intended. But here's where things take an even more unexpected turn. Because while everyone was focused on that clip, another detail surfaced, and this one completely changed the tone. Because Domani finally spoke. Not loud, not aggressive, but direct. And according to posts circulating, he said something along the lines of, "Not everything is what it looks like. People need to stop adding fuel to something they don't understand." Now that's different energy. That's someone trying to pull things back, trying to calm the situation, trying to stop it from spiraling further. But here's the problem. At this point, it might be too late for that. Because once a situation reaches this level, it doesn't slow down easily. And the internet, it's already fully locked in. Watching, waiting, reacting to every single move. But here's the real shocking reveal. Because while all of this is happening publicly, there are whispers. Again, unconfirmed. But spreading fast, that something else is happening behind the scenes. Because according to multiple sources, there may have been a second conversation. Not public, not leaked, but serious. Between T.I. and his sons. After everything started going viral, and this time, it wasn't just about what was said. It was about what happens next. Because, reportedly, T.I. made it clear that if this situation continues to escalate, there will be consequences. Real ones. Not public, not performative, but internal. Family-level decisions that could change everything moving forward. Now think about that, because that suggests something much deeper. This isn't just about a moment. It's about direction, about choices, about whether this situation becomes a turning point or the start of something even bigger. And that's exactly why people are watching so closely right now. Because at this point, there are only two paths. This gets resolved quietly behind the scenes, or it explodes publicly in a way nobody can control. And based on what we're seeing so far, we're dangerously close to the second option, because the tension is still there, the responses are still coming, and the situation still unresolved. And just when it felt like things might start calming down, they didn't, because a new wave of reactions just hit. And this time, the entire industry is starting to weigh in. And the moment the industry started weighing in, that's when this situation went from heated to completely uncontrollable, because now it wasn't just fans reacting. It was people with real influence. Artists, commentators, media voices, people who understand exactly how fast situations like this can spiral. And the reactions? They weren't neutral, not even close. Because one side immediately came out saying, "King Harris is moving reckless. This ain't his lane." While another side pushed back, "He's standing on business. Y'all just not used to someone speaking up." And just like that, the divide got even deeper. Because now it wasn't just about what happened. It was about what people believe should have happened. But here's where things got even more intense. Because one industry figure dropped a statement that instantly went viral. They said, "There's levels to this, and some people don't realize the level they just stepped into." Now that line, it hit hard. Because it echoed exactly what T.I. allegedly said during that confrontation. Which means one thing. This isn't just random drama. This is something people in the industry are taking seriously, and that's what made it even more dangerous. Because when insiders start reacting like that, it means there's more going on behind the scenes than the public fully understands. But it didn't stop there, because another voice jumped in. And this one took a completely different angle. They said, "Y'all keep tagging 50 like this is entertainment. This is how real situations get out of control." Now pause, because that's not hype. That's a warning. And suddenly, people started realizing something. That this isn't just content. This isn't just something to watch and comment on. This is real, with real consequences. And that realization, it shifted the energy, but not enough to slow it down. Because the internet kept pushing, kept tagging, kept escalating. And that's when the reactions got even more divided. Because now you have people blaming King Harris for pushing things too far, people blaming the internet for making it bigger than it needed to be, and people blaming 50 Cent for even responding in the first place. And right in the middle of all that chaos, they're trying to hold everything together. Trying to keep it from turning into something irreversible. But here's the problem. At this point, it's not just in his hands anymore, because once the industry gets involved, once voices start picking sides, once narratives start forming, it becomes bigger than one person, bigger than one family. And that's exactly what's happening right now. But just when it felt like things couldn't get more intense, a viral thread dropped. And this one didn't just react. It broke everything down in a way that made people even more uncomfortable. Because the thread claimed that this situation isn't just about disrespect or family tension, it's about something deeper. Reputation versus reality. Meaning? T.I. is trying to protect a legacy King Harris is trying to build his own identity. And 50 Cent is reacting based on respect and position. And when those three things collide, you don't get a small situation. You get chaos. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Because now it's not just about who's right or wrong. It's about what happens next. Because at this point, there's too much attention, too much pressure, too many people watching. And that means one thing. Someone is going to make the next move. And when that happens, it's either going to calm everything down or blow it up completely. And based on what's starting to happen right now, we might be seconds away from finding out which one it is. And just when it felt like things might start cooling down, They didn't, because that viral thread, it didn't slow the situation. It poured gasoline on it. Because now people weren't just reacting emotionally. They started breaking everything down, analyzing motives, intentions, trying to figure out who's really right and who's about to lose the most if this goes further. And that's when a new angle started gaining traction. One that made people pause. Because some voices in the industry began saying, this isn't about 50 anymore. This is about control. Now think about that. Control? That shifts the entire perspective. Because now it's not just about disrespect or confrontation. It's about who's controlling the narrative, who's controlling the situation, and more importantly, who's losing control. And a lot of people are pointing to one thing. This situation slipped out of TY's hands. Now, whether that's true or not, that idea alone, it's dangerous. Because once people believe that, it changes how they see everything. Every move, every response, every moment of silence. But here's where things get even more intense. Because a well-known industry insider dropped a comment that instantly went viral. If this keeps going, it's not just going to be words anymore. Now that's not speculation. That's a warning. And when people heard that, the energy shifted again. Because now it's not just about social media. It's not just about posts and comments. It's about what this could turn into if nobody steps back. And that's exactly why more voices started speaking up. Not to escalate, but to de-escalate. Not because several figures began urging both sides to fall back, to stop responding, to let things cool down before it goes any further. But here's the problem. At this point, it might not be that simple. Because King Harris hasn't fully backed down. 50 Cent has already responded. And the internet? Still pushing, still watching, still waiting for the next move. And that's what makes this so unpredictable, because now, the next move matters more than anything. But here's the twist nobody saw coming. Because while all of this is happening publicly, there are reports, again, unconfirmed, but spreading fast, that something may have already happened behind the scenes. Because according to one source, there may have been a direct message sent, not public, not leaked, but serious, between parties involved. Now, nobody knows exactly what was said, but the rumor is it wasn't friendly, it wasn't casual, it was direct, clear, and meant to set boundaries. Now, if that's true, then this situation might be closer to resolution than it looks, or closer to explosion than anyone realizes. Because direct communication like that, it can either calm things down or make them worse. And right now, nobody knows which way this is going to go. But one thing is clear. This situation is sitting on edge. Because all it takes is one more post, one more response, one more reaction, and everything could shift again. And trust me, based on what's about to happen next, we might not have to wait long to see which direction this goes. And just when it felt like the situation was sitting on the edge, ready to either calm down or explode, something happened that nobody saw coming. Because while everyone was watching the public posts, tracking every reaction, waiting for the next move, the real move allegedly already happened. Behind the scenes, because according to multiple sources now circulating, there was a private sit-down, yes, a real one. No cameras, no clips, no internet. Just the people involved. Now at first, people didn't believe it. Another rumor, another attempt to calm things down. But the details? Too specific, too consistent, too repeated by different sources to ignore. Because they're all saying the same thing. T.I. King Harris Domani, and communication involving 50 Cent all connected in a moment that wasn't meant to be seen. Now, what exactly happened in that sit-down? Nobody knows for sure, but here's what's being said. And this is where it gets serious, because according to insiders, that meeting wasn't just about fixing the situation, it was about ending it. completely drawing a line, setting terms, making it clear that whatever was happening publicly could not continue. And that's where the twist comes in, because one source claims that during that private moment, something was agreed on, not confirmed, not announced, but understood. And that agreement may change everything. Because if what's being said is true, okay, then this entire situation might be shut down before it explodes any further. But here's the part that has people questioning everything. Because right after that rumored sit-down, something very strange happened. Silence. Sudden. Complete. No new posts from King Harris, no follow-ups from 50 Cent, no reactions from T.I., nothing. Now think about that. Because for a situation this loud, to suddenly go quiet, that's not normal. That's intentional. And that's exactly why people are paying attention even more now. Because silence like that usually means one of two things. It's over, or something bigger is being prepared. And right now, nobody knows which one it is. But here's the final detail that changes everything, because just before everything went quiet, one last message surfaced, short, cryptic, and posted briefly before being deleted. And what it said has everyone thinking the same thing? Some lessons don't need to be public. Now pause. Because that line, that's not random. That's a conclusion. That's someone saying, what happened, happened. What needed to be said, was said. And what comes next won't be for the internet. And if that's true, then this entire situation might never be fully explained. Because whatever really happened behind the scenes may stay there, hidden, unconfirmed, and left for people to speculate forever. But here's the thing. Even if it goes quiet now, even if nobody speaks on it again, the impact, it's already there. The tension, the reactions, the lines that were crossed. Because moments like this, they don't just disappear, they leave marks. And those marks, they show up later in ways nobody expects. So now the real question isn't what happened between them. The real question is what changed between them. Because whatever was said in that private moment, whatever was agreed on, whatever line was finally drawn, it's going to affect everything moving forward. And trust me, even if it's quiet now, this story might not be as over as it looks. Now, after everything we just broke down, I need you to be real for a second. Because this situation, it's not as simple as people are making it. So let me ask you directly, drop your thoughts in the comments. Did King Harris really cross the line? Or is he just standing on his own and people don't like it? Was T.I. right for stepping in the way he did? Or should he have handled it differently? And 50 Cent? Did he overreact? Or was that response exactly what you'd expect from someone at his level? Because right now, the internet is split, and your opinion might be the one that actually makes sense of all this. So don't stay quiet. I'm reading everything. Now, if you want more content like this, hit that like button, because the more this video spreads, the more we can break down what's really happening behind the scenes. And trust me, there's always more than what you see on the surface. Also, if you're not subscribed yet, this is your moment. Because if anything else happens, if someone breaks their silence, if this situation sparks back up again, we're covering it first. No delays, no missing details, just straight updates and breakdowns in real time. And something tells me this isn't the last time we hear about this. So stay locked in, stay ready, and keep watching closely. Because the next update might change everything all over again.